Welcome back, welcome in another episode of Country Roads Confidential here at earsports.com. We are part of the Paramount Podcast Network. We are moving on one day deeper into our preview of West Virginia Big 12 opponents. Today, we stop with Iowa State and we talk with Nick Osen from Cyclone Alert on the 24/7 network. Nick, we are in the bowels of AT&T Stadium. This is the first one I've done face-to-face, but I feel like this is an important one. That's how big of an occasion this is, because there's a lot to talk about with Iowa State and whatever direction it's going to come in. You told me about a quiet confidence. I have questions. You have answers. What do you say we begin?
Excited to do this with you, Mike. Thank you so much. It's going to be great to, kind of preview the Cyclones. A lot of question marks around this team, varied expectations after what they lost, and glad we can do it in person today as well.
This is going to be awkward. We're handing a microphone back and forth with a pop filter on it, and we're in what is this, the DraftKings Lounge?
Yeah, just
pretty swank place inside the Jerry World. And thank you for not talking there when the microphone wasn't next to you, because it's going to be strange. Let me get to my question. I'll hand you the mic. You can handle the answer here. We're going to start at the conclusion here, as we have with all these, and we will with the rest. But look ahead in your crystal ball. Iowa State has a number of storylines you're familiar with that could point this team in a different direction. Iowa State also got one first-place vote in the media poll. Let me ask you, was that you, by the way?
That was not me for first place.
Okay, I said I was going to get to the bottom of this mystery, so at least I crossed one name off the list. So you were not the first-place vote for Iowa State, but still, that's the scope of the program, is that even with so much turnover, a lot of people believe in Matt Campbell and his staff, and it sounds like his staff is of the same mind too. But we're looking ahead. How does this season go for Iowa State?
I think that this season, in terms of expectations, are pretty open. I did kind of a similar work in terms of a preview a couple weeks ago. I've got Iowa State hovering around 7 wins, around 7-5 in the regular season, certainly getting to another bowl game. I think it's a major disappointment if they're not able to do that, because as much as they've lost, there are still some big names coming back. I know we'll touch on some of those stars and, things later, but like I said, I think it'll be a disappointment in terms of the continuity with the staff. Campbell, so many of the coordinators and position coaches are back. And a lot of these young guys that, I'll hit on as well, especially on defense in the secondary and a couple of the skill positions on offense, they've been around. They've gotten chances, whether it be because of injuries or, guys sitting out bowl games potentially, some of those big names like Breece Hall, Mike Rose. I expect Iowa State not necessarily to be in that first place realm for the Big 12. I think that's maybe a little bit high, but again, I feel that this conference is wide open. I think that the bare minimum the team has to do is get to another bowl game. I would probably set their over-under at around 7.5 wins, and I think 7 or 8 is pretty comfortable. They've got some winnable games at home. Some of their toughest opponents will be at home as well. I figure them to be, at least with the bowl game, 8 wins on the year.
All right, let's stop with one point here that you made. Roster turnover, that happened. It's hard to talk about Iowa State and not acknowledge that, but it's also hard to talk about Iowa State and not acknowledge your coaching staff continuity. I don't know how many years we've been taking away the hours or days or weeks or months until Matt Campbell leaves for a Big Ten job. Didn't happen. But to keep Manning and Heacock around too, they're both still there. That's a pretty big deal what they do, and I don't want to say they're specific, but Heacock probably is. He's been copied, I guess, but also Manning just understands what they're doing, and he's left and come back, and the offense has been good. To keep those two with Campbell, that seems as important as keeping, a running back or a receiver, a quarterback, or a star defensive lineman or star linebacker. That can solve a lot of problems, especially on that staff, right?
I completely agree. A lot of people have, tried to kind of copy or use some of what Heacock has done on defense, obviously with the 3-3-5. It's interesting in terms of you generally have to have a lot of the good personnel for it, which I've learned, especially this year, doing more recruiting, that the Cyclones tend to focus on that a lot, especially doing the best and, kind of getting the most out of the players that they can potentially get in that 3-4 star range. Manning and Campbell, they are just always on the same page. I think they're really kind of one mind at this point, the same wavelength. I like a lot of how Manning is able to, try to balance the run game, a successful run game, with some of the running backs that have, really gotten to the NFL in the last few years. A couple more very well might in the next few as well. And then using the tight ends. I mean, the tight end position has been enormous at Iowa State. This year, they're not going to have that big name necessarily going into the season, But there's a lot of confidence with some of the younger players and guys that haven't had quite as much of the game experience as, say, a Charlie Kohler or Chase Allen obviously had with the Cyclones around a long time. But, I mean, I'll hit on it a little more later, but I think that this offense led by Manning and, the quarterback that we'll get into soon is going to surprise some people. I really do. I think so much of it is going to come down to the offensive line, which isn't necessarily just on the coordinators. Obviously, the players and, the development staff have a lot to do with that in an area that there have been some question marks, but you're absolutely right. I mean, the OC and defensive coordinator and that continuity with Campbell, it's enormous. And I would say it's as much of a reason, maybe a little less, but just about up there with the players and, their continuity and losing so much star power as well.
All right, Nick, let's move on to something else that's maybe specific to your expertise here. People want to know about Iowa State. They're going to come to your website, and they're going to be very familiar with the obvious storylines here. But if they spend a lot of time there, they're going to know some of the minutia. So I want to ask you about the minutia. Give me a off-the-radar storyline, an angle, a player, something about this team. It could be positive. It could be concerning. I'm not sure. What stands out to you that is going to be an issue or is going to be a positive? It's going to be something you write about or talk about once the season does start to develop.
Yeah, from, being around the staff and obviously seeing the players a little bit in terms of some spring ball and things of that nature, I think that the secondary is actually going to be an area that impresses people. There's a lot of young guys like Miles Purchase at corner, Beau Freyler at safety, and then led by Anthony Johnson making the move from corner to safety. He's someone that's been with the Cyclones for a long time. A lot of questions about that move, but from speaking with him and actually watching him in action a little bit in spring ball and seeing kind of how the five in the defensive backfield kind of reacts, I think he's comfortable there. He's very vocal. He's a leader, someone we'll be able to speak with a little bit this week here at Big 12 Media Days. And there have been questions because of, like I said, the positional move, and a couple guys transferred out at the safety position, especially in the defensive backfield. They weren't necessarily pegged to be starters. Maybe one was in Craig McDonald, but as I mentioned, I think the youth is going to be a driving force on the back end of that defense. I'll also throw out the name Malik Verdon at safety. He's got a chance to start within his, first 2 years, really coming in. He's impressed a lot at camp. He's taken in a lot of the techniques quickly. And then I mentioned returners. Johnson has the potential to be all Big 12. Freyler showed some major flashes last year, and I saw him actually, working at some of these camps, and he has put on a lot of weight in terms of muscle. He looks like an NFL body right now. Miles Purchase is a name that the staff has been really high on and showed flashes, especially in the bowl game last year. So I've got high expectations for a group that I know fans have asked about and were somewhat worrisome about in terms of seeing guys leave to the transfer portal. I think that's going to be a legitimate backbone for this defense, and I'm excited to see what the ceiling is when those new young guys get some more experience with the lights on.
All right, we're going to blend maybe these last two questions here too into this next one. This is kind of specific to Iowa State, but I don't know if you can say that like it's a referendum on Matt Campbell, because he's proven so much, right? To build it into what he did for a couple years in a row. Like a couple years, it wasn't a one-time thing. But so many of the mainstays are gone now. Quarterback, running back, offense, defense. I mean, everybody that put that sauce together has kind of moved on. There's some exceptions. Will McDonald would be one. But they are replacing a ton, and I wonder if you learn more about Iowa State this year in that maybe the bubble burst and it's still Iowa State, which means it's going to take time to come back around again. It can come back around, maybe it takes time. Or conversely, they really have a program going, and they have a let's not reload, let's replenish. Let's not reset the board, let's refill the depth chart, because maybe they've recruited and developed really well too. Where do you think this goes? Is it one of those things where you learn for better, for worse, and then do you have an expectation as to how it might lean this year?
That's a really good question there, my friend. And I think even with you not necessarily covering the Cyclones, I think you got a pretty good feel and idea on how this staff really, feels and kind of reacts to things like this. I mean, I can tell you, I get the sense that Matt Campbell and this entire staff are really, really excited and encouraged, right, by this opportunity. Replenish, I think, is a really good word, because you do lose a ton of big names. Brock Purdy, Breece Hall, Charlie Kohler, like many stars on the offense, also a few big names on the defense. I mean, it was considered one of the best classes in the history of Iowa State. But there are pieces either that have played with those guys or of those classes or that learned from these players that will be back. And I was around as much as I could be in this spring, and I get the sense that, the staff takes so much pride in kind of basing how they do things off of their actual players and the strengths of those players. And because of that, I'm pretty confident that, they might not get to the mountaintop this season per se, or one of the bowl games that they have gotten to, like the Fiesta Bowl a couple years ago. But there's not really an expectation or an acceptance in this team kind of taking the fall back. What I think they do have going for them is that last year's team, by really all accounts, disappointed. A couple close losses really could have changed the tune of the season from 7-5, 7-6 to maybe 9 wins. And I think that's something, being around the players, being able to speak with them already, as well as the staff, they haven't forgotten how some of those games ended. They know what they're capable of, and I'll tell you from what I've seen, I expect them to be competitive in every game in the Big 12. I think they can beat anyone. I think that if turnovers or slow starts happen, they can also lose to several of the teams, even that may not be expected to, kind of be at the top of the Big 12. So I think that'll be a huge thing, taking care of the ball, starting the season off well, because I've been told from people that have been around here longer than I have that that's kind of been an issue with the Cyclones and some of these, Campbell-led teams. But I can 100% reassure folks that Campbell and the staff are very encouraged by the opportunity, and I don't think they're going to let it slip by them in terms of fully getting this team back on the map.
Yeah, I think if they go undefeated in non-conference play, you might be worried because that's unusual. If they lose a game early on, like, oh, things are on track. Things will be fine up in Ames, too. Let's talk about some of the star power that you have not yet named. You mentioned some of the secondary players. Maybe they're not stars, but because they have so many key positions that are going to be filled, someone's going to have to stand out, step up, make new names for themselves there. Ask you to admit the quarterback position because we'll get to him in a second. But where are you looking for major contributions, whether it's veteran players? I can think of one in my head for sure. Or if it's guys who are maybe new or in an elevated position. Who do you think might begin to make a name for himself this year?
Yeah, so starting on offense, won't touch the quarterback yet. I would say the biggest name is probably Xavier Hutchinson, one of the top wideouts really in the country. He's got an NFL future, pretty close to an NFL body, great catch radius, can really run all the routes. I've been impressed with him both in the spring and, watching him from before, as I'm a little newer to this beat. So the expectations are still very much there for him, as well as Will McDonald, who certainly has an NFL future at the defensive end position. There was hope that he would put on a little more kind of weight and muscle mass going into this year. I've seen a little bit of it. I'd say it's a little bit harder with his frame, and he doesn't want to lose some of his speed and technique, which has allowed him to get to the quarterback so well. But those are two names people know, as well as Orion Vance at the linebacker position. Little more of one of the leaders, wasn't necessarily expected to come back, but he will be, obviously starting at linebacker. And then a name that I expect people to fully know and be familiar with, if they're not already, is Jalen Knoll at the wideout position. He's a little bit on the, not necessarily as big as Hutchinson or some of the great wideouts that Iowa State has had, like Alan Lazard, but he's quick. He's put on a lot of muscle. I saw that recently. Can run every route, and he's electric with the football. He really showed that in the bowl game against Clemson last season. Kind of when I started, he got his shot. That was as a true freshman. So the expectations, not only around Iowa State, but I've even seen some national accounts around him are pretty high. I'll throw Deshaun Hanukkah out there at the tight end position. He won't likely have a Charlie Kohler type year, but he's someone that I'm excited to see, and that the staff has seen some real flashes of potential, especially catching the rock in spring ball. He's got to work on some of his run blocking and pass pro and things like that, but those are names that I'm really excited to see flourish coming into the fall.
All right, we began at the end with the final look at the season. We're going to end at the beginning because everything in the Big 12 starts with a quarterback play. That's been a strength for a while. A guy who was there for quite some time is no longer there, and you have to fill some pretty big shoes there. It seems like it's come down to one name, and it's Hunter Dekkers, and I'm not sure that there's even a question going in. You could fill me in more on this, but how does the quarterback position look for a place that has been pretty solid under center for a couple of years?
Yeah, I'd say going into spring, it wasn't necessarily 100% certainty about Deckers. Now that spring has come and gone, though other quarterbacks have impressed, he is the clear QB1. From what I've seen compared to tape last year, his body's much more cut, well built. He's cleaned up some of his technique. He's got a faster release. And he hasn't lost the athleticism or the deep ball that I know fans have been excited about the last couple seasons. So I've gone on record in writing and other podcasts and things like that. So I'll keep it going here with you, Mike. I expect a lot out of this kid. I think that he's got star potential. It will be a different offense and a different type of way to play the quarterback position than Purdy. I think Purdy was really great with kind of making plays on the run, intangibles, well known for his leadership and just being one of the faces of Iowa State. Deckers, I think, has a lot more of the actual natural and physical tools, and it'll just be a point of putting things together. I'm really interested to see how Manning and Campbell kind of make the most of his legs as well, because he's fast, he's strong, like I just mentioned, and he throws a better deep ball than Purdy. I can confidently say that, and I'll throw out this name because it wasn't mentioned in the last segment. They've got a new wideout, Dimitri Stanley, who's kind of known for speed and going deep down the field. I think Deckers will be able to flourish there. I think that he's got the chance to be one of the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks in the Big 12, certainly. I know there are plenty of talented guys in this conference, but I'm excited, and I've said that I think if he can play to his potential while limiting turnovers, because he does have a gun of an arm, I could see Iowa State sneaking around 8, maybe 9 wins.
The point about the legs is interesting because I know it drove West Virginia's coaches crazy that they would have Purdy and all of a sudden he'd be running for a first down or getting open and flipping it to somebody down the field. So if that threat is still there, if it's similar, oh my God, things haven't changed that much too. Hey, we forgot about one more rookie new name that's going to have a big season. It's you. It's a good start. This is a promising debut for you. How do you like the beat so far?
Thank you very much. No, this has been a blast, and I love the beat. So this will be my first full football season. You know, I covered basketball, a Sweet 16 run. I actually got to be in my home state doing that, so that was pretty incredible. And, you know, being around this fan base and the team so far, it's incredibly passionate in Ames and around Iowa State. Like I've said, maybe I'm a little bit too optimistic with some of these things, but because I haven't been around the team and I've seen the talent and the potential of a lot of these, I'd say sophomores and juniors in the program, I think it's going to be a fun season, and I'm really blessed and excited to be there for it.
Well, that seems like the story for Iowa State, and we have been fully briefed, I guess, by Nick. Nick, thanks for the time. Glad you were able to hang out with me here in the middle of the week at Big 12 Media Days and before the season gets started. We'll do this again soon. Thanks a lot.
Can't wait till next time, man. Thanks so much, Mike.